hi again, everybody. Welcome back to Sports Talk. Doug Miles, Don Henderson, and our guest. Well, we got to play his little theme song here before we can introduce him properly. That can only mean one thing. It's time to talk to our old buddy Pete the Prophet, because really there's nothing else going on in the world of sports except horse racing. So we said, why not call Pete up and maybe you can kill a few minutes with him. So Pete, how are you?
I love being the last option. I've always loved being the last option. I'd like to say two things before we start. First, great music. I mean, that sounded like the Mod Squad.
We are high tech now. Yes, new equipment and everything since you've been with us.
That was huge. And two, I'd like to say to Don, congratulations on the Hall of Fame. I saw the speech. You were great, and congratulations on that. I might be a little late, but that's because no one calls me anymore.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. Before we talk about horse racing, I want to know how have they put more than a shovel in the ground out there at Belmont for the whole new facility for the hockey team and all the rest of it? Is anything going on?
You would not believe it. Literally looks like it will be done in a week. I mean, what they have done there. You can see the entire almost one of the corners. Let's say where the goal would be completely. The rounded edges. It's amazing how much work that they have done there. And I have not been by there recently. I don't know if that's considered essential work here in New York, and they're still working during this crisis. I would assume so. I think there's too much money for them not to be still working. But it is amazing how fast they're putting this thing up.
Well, Pete, you were very pessimistic for the Islanders for a long time. We talked for at least 3 years about putting the shovel in and taking the shovel out. So that's very, very encouraging. Even the New York Post hasn't really done a pictorial on what the new arena is going to look like, but obviously you're very optimistic now.
I am. I mean, they've really, the speed is really shocking to me how fast this is. I can't tell you how many people have commented on it already. People send me that there'll be a picture, let's say, on the Newsday, and they send it to me, and they say, I cannot believe how fast, because everything here travels with no speed here at all, especially anything that has to do with the New York Racing Association. But this has been quite a sight to see, and I'm very happy and kind of proud that it's going to be. I still don't agree with it being there, but but it is quite amazing. It'll be quite a ticket when it comes out.
Doug?
Yeah, Pete and I, for those not aware, grew up in the same town, Floral Park, which is literally a block or two away from Belmont Racetrack, where this is being built. And I know, Pete, you and I, kind of follow what's going on in Floral Park. I know you still have family there, and I kind of keep track online on Facebook. There's a Floral Park page. But I guess there was some contention in Floral Park. They wanted to kind of put a block on it for a while with all the building and the roads and all that. But I guess they got rid of that whole lawsuit, right? Obviously, they're building it.
Yeah, I think what they've always tried to do is, I'm sure this is what anybody would be doing in this case. They're trying to get whatever money they can get out of this, and that's why they're putting up certain things. I understood some of the reasons why they were doing what they were doing, but when they talk about traffic and things like that, I mean, you'd have to know Floral Park. And Doug, I think you can vouch for this. I do not see any issues with traffic in Floral Park. It's not really involved in it. I'm sure they're not going to let them come in from the Plainfield Avenue entrance. They're going to be coming in from off the highway and from
off the Cross Island Parkway. That would have to be right?
Cross Island Parkway and Hempstead Turnpike. So I do not see there's no people are coming down the streets of Floral Park to get here. So I do not understand what they're talking about. I understand some stuff about them worried about the school and the work they were going to do by there, having an electrical, a grid there, and they were worried a little bit about that. But I think it was just a little bit of a money grab, and they really had nothing to stand on.
Pete, you and Doug would know a lot more about it than I, but it seems to me a year or 2 years ago we started to talk about this. There was really only not a graveyard for cars, but a storage, new cars. Dealers, all they did was store cars there where this arena is going to be, correct?
Yes. Well, where the arena itself is going to be, it was actually that's where parking was for the track. One of the 2 or 3 areas they had. The other areas are all the cars. Actually, it has not touched that part of the business yet. But when they start to build the hotel and the things on the other side of Hempstead Turnpike, that will start to affect their business. But I was down there the other day, and boy, I cannot believe the sea of cars that are still all over the place.
Oh, Doug?
Got a couple of questions already on Facebook, gentlemen. Our friend Rich Spitz-Spitaleri, listening up in Boston, he asks, I guess we can't ask Naira what the holdup is, can we? As he puts an LOL with that. So Naira, not exactly the, like you just mentioned, Pete, the most forthcoming organization. They actually went bankrupt. But does Naira have anything to say about the Islanders at all?
No, they have nothing to say about that.
We didn't think so.
No, they luckily they have no control. Or that's the reason why things are actually getting done, is because they have absolutely no control over what's going on there. So, no.
And our friend
Mark.
Mark.
Before we switch over to the horse racing, which is really over the last 2 weeks has been a big topic of conversation, not necessarily on talk shows around the country, because unfortunately, racing has sort of slipped by the average sports fan altogether. But as we look ahead, Pete, I know you're a big National Hockey League enthusiast and an Islander enthusiast, and it looks like they're trying to make a couple of moves now that things are shut down and sign some players and do some things that would be very positive for the team.
I'm sorry you cut out there, Don. I missed that last part.
The Islanders, it seems to me they're making a few major decisions in the right direction, upward.
It does seem that way, but the only problem that I always see with the Islanders, and even with the new management, is they never seem to get. And I think actually with the new arena and the fact that because of the management team, that now people want to come there. I mean, they finally got a really big signing, during this period, but they still need a little bit more. Their offense is very lame, actually. Their defense, their goaltending is very good. They play very well in the system. They just don't have that scoring, and you can always be a playoff contender and always be in it, but you want to have a shot at the Stanley Cup, and they really don't have a shot at the Stanley Cup. I cannot believe I'm actually saying that the Rangers actually have a little bit more of a shot down the road with some of the ways they're doing this and some of the rookies and the things they're doing. They're going for more of a youth movement, even though the Islanders are a young team, but they don't have the scoring, and which is pretty much the way they used to do it with the Devils. They were pretty much a defensive squad first, but they don't quite have that same backing. So to me, they just don't go far enough.
Well, I got a lot of faith in Lou. I think he'll get the thing going the right. He did right away when he first came in. I made them competitive last year when nobody thought he would. This year they slumped back a little bit, but Doug, let's get to the topic we were going to discuss, and that's horse racing.
I do want to, before we get to that, we have another question on Facebook. Mark Black, buddy here in Sarasota, asks, Pete, are they going to bring back the fisherman jersey? Fish sticks when the Islanders go into Belmont. I hope not.
Well, I'm hoping they just put 2 fish sticks. I don't want the fishermen. I just want the 2 fish sticks. If they can bring that back, that's something Naira would do, by the way.
Yes.
If they were running the team, they would end up bringing back
the worst jersey ever in any sport was the fisherman. And, ever.
Embarrassing. The worst thing I've ever seen. I cannot believe it was done. You still think about it. It was tragic. Thank God it came back.
And the colors, too. I mean, they changed the team's colors. It was kind of like a teal and aqua and like a crummy orange. It was horrible.
I can tell you this. When I go to the game, every once in a while, maybe you see one of those jerseys out, but it's always like a joke. So a fan will wear it because that's just a part of the history that you just kick off to the side. That is embarrassing. And we don't want to talk about it anymore.
I have a lot of faith in Lou Lamoriello. He's going to do it. He's my idol.
He is going to do it.
I love the guy. I think he's one of the best general managers in all of sports.
He's awesome, and under his watch, there would have been no change in the logo. So
Well, let's move into the horse racing story, Pete, and a lot going on, obviously, and not on the track as much, but scheduling-wise, again, we don't know exactly when things are going to happen, but they did move the Derby at least a couple of weeks ago to a September 5th date, which means the Belmont will be sometime in October in New York. Depending on what happens, it's going to be kind of a wild fall for all the sports, but what's the latest? You know what's going on with the Triple Crown and particularly just racing in New York in general.
Well, I don't think they're going to do the Belmont Stakes afterwards, because the problem is it runs into the Breeders' Cup. So
right.
Some things have been talked about. They might keep the same date and maybe cut the distance down this year. They haven't announced what they're going to do. The Preakness hasn't announced what they're going to do. It's pretty much up in the air as to how it's going to change the entire season completely, because now you're basically focusing for a race as a 3-year-old. You're focusing for the Derby, so you might even be very lightly raced. It's going to affect the Travers. It's going to affect a lot of races that are coming up. I guess I was a little surprised they actually moved the Derby. I actually thought they might. I understand the circumstances why they didn't, but I actually thought they might do it anyway, because it's such a big race, and it really would be like a national. Everybody would be watching it, since there's really no other sports on TV. But that being said, I don't think the Belmont is going to be changing too much, because that date is kind of their anchor date in their calendar. So it's going to be a very strange year overall. And now racing in New York, now that it's been suspended, really don't know when that's going to get started either again. You have to figure it's going to be probably a couple of months.
Well, Pete, we've now gone through about 3 years where they've put the Iron Curtain over the Preakness, because they think that the Preakness has got to be moved to another track. And it was even more talked about over the last couple of months because of the condition of the track. So, or the facility, I shouldn't say the track itself, but the facility. What do you think is going to happen there?
Well, they came up with a new proposal actually for Pimlico. So I don't know if they're going to try to keep it. I mean, because that track is just dilapidated. It was dilapidated when Doug worked for the Sun Radio Network and sent me there on top of the roof.
The Pimlico
watch,
Special.
Winning
yes.
Colors.
You covered that race for us.
Yeah, that was quite a day. So that's really the only way they could keep that race there. So I think that's really just the way it's gonna be. I'm big on tradition, and there isn't a track that can hold the infield. If they didn't run the Derby because they wanted the crowds and the whole event, because it's certainly a gigantic event for Kentucky. I don't see how they can. What I would think that for them, money wise, staying at the Preakness, staying at Pimlico, would be the move, and just tearing down that place and making it into some sort of state of the art, or just something decent. They don't race there too long, but that infield holds so many people, and it's such a tradition. So I think they're going to probably do something there.
Yeah, I had a number of grandchildren that went to the University of Delaware, and that was one of their big trips in the spring. University of Delaware used to run a bunch of buses down to Pimlico, and they'd be on the infield, just as you're saying. And they always thought that was quite an event, which it is. But as I say, I just think that there's pressure to move it away from that track and go to another track in Maryland. Yeah.
I don't know what where else they would go. If they would just go over to Laurel,
right,
and race it there, or just get it out of Maryland entirely. And
I don't think they'll do that. I think before they do that, they'd move to Laurel.
Yeah, I believe that would be true. It's funny you're talking about that. I remember when I would drive to the Preakness, and you'd park in the neighborhood, so you park many blocks around, and there was a small business of all sorts of kids that would have shopping carts, and they would come up to your car, and for $5, $10, you put all your beer and all your stuff, and they'd take you all the way to the front gate. So that even hurts them if it moves.
Yeah, Aqueduct, I know, was only racing, 3 days a week in the winter and early spring meet, and they were doing some racing. I just happened to flip on about a week or so ago. You could watch the races. It was crowdless. Nobody in the stands, obviously, but they did that for a while, and now they've shut it down totally. I guess it's because of the 50-person rule, right? Or maybe it's the 10-person rule in New York. They can't even have enough people in the backstretch. I mean, that'd be too many people to have even racing with no people in the stands, right?
No, actually, one backstretch worker came down with it.
Oh, is that why? All right, I didn't hear that.
Yeah. So once that happened, they quarantined him and his roommate, and then they decided to cancel racing. I mean, I don't know your guys. I'd be curious to know what your guys' opinions of it are. I mean, listen, I love horse racing, and I certainly wanted to go on for my own benefit. I didn't think that, I mean, someone is going to get it. Someone's going to have it. And in horse racing itself, you're not really the way they even did the social distancing when they were in the paddock and stuff. I didn't think it was that big of a deal to shut down the racing and the economy of racing and what it does to New York State over that. And I really can't believe, I still wanted to race. I cannot believe that the both Florida tracks are still running. I think they should run, but I would just think at a certain point, is this going to be an uproar over it? But the horses still have to be trained. People still have to be around. So, I mean, I think they should be allowed to race. So really, it's just those two tracks now and Oaklawn that are the only ones that are continuing right now, and Santa Anita for the time being.
Hey, let's go to the dark side now. We've sort of stayed away from it until this part of the conversation. Bob Baffert's the only one that really came out with a very, very extensive interview earlier this week. I don't know, either Friday of last week or Monday of this week. I can't remember which one. I read the whole thing. Because the scandal right now in racing, the one thing they didn't need, they've now got.
I think that it's something that finally, and I'd like to say finally that something might be done about all this. I mean, there's some pretty, obviously some big name trainers, Navarro on one side, who, if you play horse racing, about his abilities to turn, three-legged horses into four-legged horses, and Service, who is, obviously, the big race in Dubai winner. He's got a lot of good stock. I think it's about time that they come up with something here and try to. I mean, it's been so basic. We've talked about it for so long. You can't just see a horse that is a very average horse and then get claimed by somebody and given to one of these super trainers and then move up, 20 buyer points. And obviously a completely different horse. Obviously something's gone on, and it's about time that something happened. And I hope that they pass an integrity act, and I hope it goes forward.
I just wonder, Pete, we've seen what's happened in baseball with the PEDs, steroids, and all that, and, there's always a big outroar. People aren't going to follow baseball. People didn't really seem to care that much. I wonder if horse racing fans, the ones that are left, really care about this. I mean, horse racing, they want to go see it, the ones that are still into it. I don't think you're going to get new fans, but do really people care about that? They should care about it, but do you think they do?
About the drugging?
Right.
Yeah, I do not. I think that real bettors, the people that the big bettors that do 90% of the betting, they definitely do. But they adapt with the times. They know exactly. They know that when Navarro gets a horse, that it moves up. They know a lot of these trainers and the magic that they can do. So they kind of play along with it. They've adapted, but certainly that's one of the biggest complaints. But there probably isn't a bigger complaint nowadays in the bettor's mind than the late money coming into the pools. It is absolutely amazing how you can have a horse that's 6-1 that's going into the gate at Gulfstream Park. I mean, this is honestly what happened to me, and it was at Tampa, so it's a smaller pool. I bet a horse that was 5-1 as they were going into the gate, and they opened the gate. He went out to the lead, and his price was 8-5. So, and a bet I never would have made. But this, for the racing community that does play, is the hardest thing to figure out. You get a guide by looking at maybe some double prices and exacta prices, and maybe you can figure out what's going on. But then all of a sudden, this rush of money comes in the last whatever. And, some of it is sort of how you trade now in the stock market. It's machine. They look for inequities in the market, and then money goes in based on that. So that is so difficult and so unfair. You think somebody is doing something on purpose. It's, the integrity really starts you start to feel something wrong when that stuff happens. And this is going on for a long time. We as horse players can take a lot, and we're going to take this, but it's something that needs to be addressed at some point.
The other factor that's come into the light today is that a number of these horses are breaking down. They have to destroy, not necessarily that they're the big time horses, but you got to run. There's very few horses now to run, and they're running everybody. They inject them with these dope things, and all of a sudden they break down, and that's the end of that horse.
Yeah, and that's why it's the first time I've ever heard anyone talk about the safety of the jockey. Also, it's
right.
It's just the horse, but also the safety of the jockey and the exercise rider and anybody else kind of involved with the horse. And that's a really, an excellent point that you have to be, you have to realize that that's just more than that. Now, for me, the thing that all happened in Santa Anita last year, to me and the report came out and basically said that it was due to the rain and the massive, rain they had and how it changed the track condition. They had whatever, 18, 20 inches of rain and, whatever, a few days, a month, whatever it was. So that was an aberration. But one of the things I think they can do to maybe just make horse racing a little bit more palatable for the people is the whipping of the horses. Now, the whipping is something that I understand that it can be, for jockeys, they certainly want whips and they need it for their own safety. But, how many times every single day you watch a horse that is hiring and could be, just dropping back and still being whipped? It's just a bad optic. And that doesn't need to happen. It's just in the battle for a race or maybe even a position to finish in the top 3 or 4. But when you see a horse that's been trailing the field and he's being whipped, I understand that sometimes they want to show that so people don't think the race is being fixed. But, you hit a horse is not going to come, it makes a little difference. It moves them up a little bit. It doesn't change him from 28 lengths back to win the race. So that's something that really does need to be addressed also.
Don't you think they're also, and I guess we've talked about this before, they've bred all the sturdiness or the toughness out of horses? We were talking about, in the 40s and 50s, horses would run just about every week, maybe every 2 weeks. They'd race for many, many years, unless they, went to the stud farm early. But somehow all the toughness has been bred out of these horses, and they break down even more so than years ago, right? It seems that way, or did we not hear about it as much back then?
No, it's definitely a difference. I think we've spoken about how the iron horses of back when would run in the Derby, run in the race before the Preakness.
Right.
The Jersey Derby was like the week before, and then they run in the Preakness, and they run in the Belmont, and they were constantly running because they were different. They were just totally different animals. And now as we breed more for speed, I was listening to somebody today on the radio talk about baseball and how, you never heard of Tommy John surgery in baseball, back in the day, Gibson and those guys pitching. Of course, it wasn't around, but those injuries weren't there. And now all you see is this kind of injury. Noah Syndergaard now is.
Yeah, we should mention Noah Syndergaard is going to have Tommy John. We should have mentioned at the top, but he's out. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's out, and why is that? Well, most people think it's because you have to throw 100 miles an hour to be in the big leagues. Then they weren't. Tom Seaver wasn't throwing that. He wasn't throwing 98 miles an hour. So it's almost as if for them it's more about speed. So with that has come some injuries. And for horse racing, it has been breeding for speed that has really kind of affected the breed. There's no more about distance and no more about being sturdy. It's just a totally different take for it now. So that's 100% right that they've totally changed now. I mean, horses are racing 2 or 3 times to get to the Derby. Back in the day, come on. Secretariat ran, or whatever. He ran in,
about 10 races, wasn't it?
2-year-old.
Yeah.
Yeah. He ran in a ton of races beforehand. Now, nobody runs at all. So it's such a different game now.
He's talking about the same thing, and actually from the sprinters is more prevalent because they want them to run fast as they can for that long 6 furlongs or whatever they're going to run. How about the Lasix? What are they doing about that? What states still allow Lasix to be used?
Well, I think if I'm right, I still think it's every single one. I think NYRA is doing something which I think will get a very good. And I can't believe I just said NYRA is going to do something good, but they're going to do a Lasix free as a 2-year-old. You're not allowed to race a 2-year-old with Lasix, so that's a first step.
Let me interrupt, Pete, just to say maybe you would explain to the listeners. You and I, and obviously Doug, we've been around this business for a long time, but maybe you would explain exactly what the Lasix does.
Lasix basically is an anti-bleeding drug. Horses, when they run fast, they have a habit of bleeding at different levels. Sometimes it goes into their lungs, sometimes it's their nose, sometimes you can actually physically see it. And it obviously affects the horse and the horse's performance. So they put this Lasix in, which stops that, bleeding from happening. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes horses will still bleed through it. And, back when like Ali Sheba ran and stuff like that, New York they didn't allow Lasix. And the Lasix was starting to get a little bit, more, it was much more prevalent. And I remember in that particular year, Ali Sheba couldn't run on Lasix in New York and, didn't win the Belmont. I think that that part of the game now, eventually, there was so much pressure from trainers to continue that they had to get with the times, and so Lasix became such. Now, I mean, every single horse runs on Lasix, but the proponents of it say that that you almost couldn't have racing without it, and that it's minor stuff. I don't know how I fall on that fence about it, but anything to keep the horse more sound. I mean, I certainly think that the old hay and oats is the way to go.
Just got a couple of minutes left with our friend Pete the Prophet, and again, nobody knows exactly when sports and everything's really going to return to normal. But let's say we got another 2 or 3 weeks of this. Like you said, right now the horses aren't training as much as they would normally, if at all. So, is there going to be any warm-up races heading into whatever would be the Triple Crown season? I mean, they have to reschedule all of that. It's really a logistical mess, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, now everyone's just going to fend for themselves, and I think they're just going to run, their own race. I mean, there's going to be a different sort of Triple Crown this year, where, there won't be a traditional Triple Crown as we know it, but
right.
The Belmont runs the race in June, and then maybe they do the Preakness in. And listen, who knows if they'll be racing in June? But if they did that, and then they did the Preakness maybe towards the end of July, mid-July, and then into the Derby, maybe that could be something. But really, who's going to want to run in those races?
Running it backwards
when you're trying
like that.
to prep.
Yeah. Makes no sense.
Yeah,
especially Pete, you're talking about the Belmont, which how many horses in a year ever run 2 miles? They don't. I mean, you can't just do that.
Nobody wants to run a mile and a half anyway.
Right.
So now to run a mile and a half to start, to start your season is, the race is just going to lose, all of its luster. All of them are going to lose something a little bit this year. Everyone's going to be scrambling. I mean, who's running in the Travers? I mean, the Travers in the Midsummer Derby. It's the third week in August, and the Derby's 2 weeks later. That's not going to happen either. So it really is a logistical nightmare as to what people are going to do and what you are as a horse trainer. You're shooting for the Derby. That's what you're shooting for. So these other, you might do some preps, small preps to get to it, but you want to win that race and then go from the Derby into the Breeders' Cup, which will be 2 months later. So, and it's funny how they picked that date. TV is so in control of this. Is that happened to be the one? I guess Notre Dame isn't playing that day. NBC has it, so Notre Dame's not playing. So they figured out so they went right to that date, which is
that's exactly what they did. That is exactly what they did.
Yeah, it's pretty smart. I wonder if Notre Dame played, or I wonder when they would have tried to fit that in. Maybe they run the race on a Sunday. Maybe they changed everything. Would have been the first Sunday in September. I don't know what's going on. But in general, the horses are training. Now they're still training. But I just heard that Todd Pletcher is taking all his horses from Belmont, and he's giving some over to another trainer there. But the other ones he's sending down south, down to you guys down there to his farm and to the Palm Beach training facility. And basically, it's not just about the racing; it's about trying to keep his people safe. And so that way, you just take all the horses out of here. And it's a really, for the owners, what do you do? Let's say this goes on for a couple of months. That's a lot of bills and not making any money. Do you start selling horses? Do you have to get out of the game? Yeah. It just falls down to everybody involved.
Well, fellas, I'm a pessimist. I think when they talk about Easter, things starting to get back to normal, I don't believe it. I think we're going to be well into May and maybe into June before things really start to turn around. So maybe I'm 100% wrong, but I'm not optimistic about what's going on right now.
I'm not either. I think Easter is ridiculous to think it's going to be Easter. To me, it's got to be. I think at the minimum we are 2 months away from anything, starting to get back to any sort of normalcy.
Right, I agree. I think the only sport that has a chance is going to be football, because they're only going to have to back up a little bit, because I think by that time they'll have a chance. But I agree with you. I think this is going to be a long, drawn-out haul.
I'm looking forward to when football goes to a 42-game season. That's what I don't know when that's going to happen, but I'm hoping that happens.
Well, it only means, Pete, we're going to have you on a lot, because if nothing else is going on, we'll just talk to you.
Yeah, listen, I'm the go-to time when things are bad, and I'm okay with that.
I always learn something, Pete. I love to have you on here, because every time you come on, I learn something.
Well, what's great about it is that I have 6 months to prepare. So that's why I sound smart, because I have a lot of time.
A subtle dig, Don, at us for not having him on for 6 months. A subtle dig.
little, just a little dig.
We will have you on much more frequently. Pete, always great to talk to you.
Yes.
Do you have a website? Oh, no, you don't have one, so we can't plug your website.
No, I don't have a website. I don't even think I have a computer. Actually, I don't even have a cell phone.
I was say, yeah, do you have a phone, but you're on the public phone. How many quarters did it cost you?
It's a lot of money, but I'll be sending in my reimbursement. I definitely want my expenses paid on this one. So,
Pete, always great to talk to you.
Thank you very much again. Very nice, very nice.
Very great talking to you guys, too. Good to hear your voice again, Don, Doug, whatever. But anyway, please be safe. Everybody out there, enjoy.
We'll do something after Easter, and we'll talk to you then. And Don, good talking to you, and we'll talk to you again real soon. Thanks for listening, everybody.